He froze every account, canceling my card as I scanned the cheapest milk carton at the store. The text alert read, "Card declined. Contact account holder." The account holder was not me anymore. That night, he declared to the entire family, "From now on, she will manage her own finances. My father is not funding her." But only a few hours later, the man they called the real estate titan pulled me aside, handed me a file, and stated, "Sweetheart, here, you are not the one who's broke. He is." My name is Aubrey Clark, and I am 32 years old, standing in the fluorescent purgatory of a budget supermarket in Harborview, California. The air here smells perpetually of stale produce and floor cleaner, a stark contrast to the filtered, expensive air of the Hale family's homes. I'm standing at the express checkout, clutching a half-gallon of 2% milk, a bruised onion, and a generic box of cereal. This is my basket of shame. In the current climate of skyrocketing costs, even these few essentials feel like a splurge. I remind myself that a year ago, I wouldn't have even noticed the price of a gallon of milk. I would have grabbed the organic, grass-fed version without looking at the tag. But that was a different life, before the subtle, financial tightening began. The cashier, a teenager with iridescent blue hair and a bored expression, scans my items. The total flashes on the screen, $8.73. I slide the sapphire blue credit card, the joint card, the one Tyler called ours, into the reader. It accepts the chip. The machine beeps once, and then, instead of the cheerful approved, a cold red message lights up. Transaction denied. My chest tightens. A sudden, cold squeeze. System error. I tell myself immediately, that's all it can be. This card has a limit of over $1 million. I pull it out and try again, swiping it this time, just in case the chip reader failed. The cashier sighs, the sound loud enough to make the woman behind me, who is pushing a cart overflowing with name-brand diapers and ready-made meals, shift her weight impatiently. "It didn't go through, ma'am," the cashier drones, without looking up. "Try a different one." I feel the heat rising in my neck. Panic. I think, don't panic. I pull out my phone and open the banking app, simultaneously trying the card a third time. I see the cashier's eyes follow the decline message as it flashes again. This time, her annoyance is more overt. "Look, we've got a line," she says, tapping her nails on the counter. "Is it going to work or not?" I ignore her, focusing on the phone screen. The app loads with agonizing slowness. The Hale family logo, a stylized, imposing H, hovering over a blank white page. When the dashboard finally snaps into view, the world tilts. The joint checking account, the one Tyler deposited my residual earnings from my old data analytics firm into, the one that held the daily operating budget for our life. Zero balance, not just low, but an impossible, absolute zero. Every single cent is gone. I scroll frantically. The joint savings account, where we had been building capital for the hypothetical future baby fund, zero balance. The line of credit linked to the card, status changed to closed. A wave of nausea hits me, stronger than the smell of stale produce. This is not a hack. Banks don't drain accounts to zero instantly unless instructed. This is a deliberate, targeted act. Then, I see the notification buried under a recent flurry of low-priority alerts. It's a system notification, not an email. Account 5034 joint. Hale. Ownership structure modified. Effective immediately. All transaction approval authority transferred to primary account holder. Mr. Tyler Hale. Secondary access. Card 0045. Revoked. My breath hitches. Secondary access revoked. I'm not even a secondary holder anymore. I'm nothing. He didn't just empty the accounts. He deleted me from the financial hierarchy entirely. He did this without a word, a warning, or even a text message. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside or pay up," the cashier says, her voice sharper now, drawing more attention from the growing queue. I swallow the lump of shame, my cheeks burning. The woman behind me clicks her tongue loudly. I feel the collective judgment of the middle class descending on me, the poor, entitled trophy wife who can't even afford $8. I lift the carton of milk and the onion. I need to return everything except these two. I manage, my voice a shaky whisper. And the cereal. The cashier rolls her eyes but starts voiding the other items. The jar of fancy, imported jam I'd impulsively grabbed, the organic chicken breast, the new laundry detergent. She retolls the 3 remaining items, $4.59. My hand is trembling as I reach into the small, zipped pocket of my purse, the one I used to keep for emergency cash or loose change. I find 2 slightly crumpled $5 bills. I place them on the counter. "Keep the change," I mutter, grabbing the brown paper bag before she can hand me the coins. I need to escape the noise, the staring eyes, the suffocating presence of that woman and her judgment behind me. My legs feel like wet cement as I power walk toward the exit, the small, cold bag of groceries feeling like a lead weight in my hand. It's not the $4.59, or the humiliation. That sends a chill down my spine. It's the realization that this was calculated. This wasn't an accident. This was a message, delivered with the precision of a scalpel. I get into my car, a 7-year-old, slightly scuffed Acura that Tyler insists on calling my daily driver, while his garage holds 4 exotic sports cars. The AC unit smells faintly of mildew, a smell Tyler has complained about but never bothered to fix, claiming the car was mine to maintain. I pull out of the parking lot and merge onto the slow afternoon traffic, the California sun glinting off the hood of the car. My hands grip the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles are white. The memories start flooding in. Tyler's casual remarks over the last 6 months, phrases that sounded like responsible financial advice but were, in hindsight, the steady sawing of my financial leash. Money should be managed by one person for greater efficiency. Sweetheart, you're too busy with the house and the startup logistics. You don't need to worry about the finances. Just leave it to me. It's too complex for you to track every day. We'll close your old individual investment accounts. No sense in paying separate management fees when we can consolidate the assets under the Hale umbrella. It's safer. I had rationalized it all. Tyler was busy running the supposed-to-be billion-dollar startup. He was the son of Richard Hale. He knew about big money. I had ceded control, piece by piece, believing I was enabling our shared future, believing that we were one entity. When I finally pull up to the townhome, the temporary home, a high-end rental property that still had Hale Holdings paperwork tacked to the corkboard, I don't even bother parking in the garage. I leave the Acura right in the driveway. The door clicks shut behind me, plunging the small entry hall into a tense, silent shadow. I find Tyler immediately. He is on the oversized, charcoal velvet sofa, impeccably dressed in a custom-tailored shirt, watching CNBC. The television is silently flashing stock tickers, the colors jumping green and red. He doesn't look up. He's holding a thick glass of something amber. Bourbon, probably, though it's only 4 in the afternoon. "You're home early," he says, his voice devoid of curiosity, flat and easy. I drop the paper bag of groceries onto the granite counter. The noise is louder than I intended. "My card was declined," I state, my voice strangely steady, like a wire drawn taut just before snapping. He finally turns his head, a slow, deliberate movement. His smile is thin, practiced, and utterly cold. "Yes, I took care of that." He takes a leisurely sip of his drink. "I've separated all the accounts. Aubrey, effective this morning." I stare at him, feeling the blood drain from my face. "Separated? What does that mean, Tyler?" "It means I've closed the joint accounts and moved all the capital back into my private portfolio. From now on, the money that I deem your spending will be transferred separately. A fixed allowance, if you will. Don't spend over it. It makes budgeting so much easier." Allowance. The word hits me like a slap across the face. "My salary," I choke out. "My old residual income from Kendricksa. The money I made before we were married. The money we saved together. Where is that?" He leans back, resting his arm along the back of the sofa, looking at me as if I am a child asking too many questions about complex adult math. It's all consolidated. It's all technically mine. As the primary account holder, everything was in my name from the start. As per the agreement. He pauses, that chilling smile returning. Besides, Father advised this. He felt it was necessary to protect family assets from non-essential exposure. You know, with the market being so volatile. Protect family assets. That phrase echoes the subtle dismissiveness that has always haunted my interactions with the Hale family. I take a step back, the granite counter pressing into my spine. In a few clicks, in a few scribbled initials on documents I signed without reading closely enough, believing in a partnership that never existed. I had been completely dismantled. I was no longer a partner, no longer a co-investor. I was just an expense line item, a dependent who needed permission for every carton of milk, every bruised onion. My throat closes up. I want to scream, to lash out, to smash the expensive glass in his hand. But the data analyst in me, the one who plans for every contingency, forces the rage back down, cooling it into hard, crystalline resolve. He thinks he has broken me. He thinks I am now financially neutered, dependent on his arbitrary, controlling generosity. I look at the man I married, the man who is now watching the financial news again, dismissing me with his posture. A single terrifying question burns through the cold shock and settles deep in my gut. If they could do this to me, without blinking, without a trace of remorse, what else have they been planning? What else is set up behind my back? And more importantly, did I leave enough paper trail for the fight I now realize I have to wage? I don't say another word. I turn and walk toward the staircase, the silence of the large, temporary house swallowing my fear, leaving only the nascent, metallic taste of revenge. The game has changed. This isn't about $8.73. It's about ownership, power, and survival. The cold shock of the declined card fades, replaced by a deep, hollow echo in my memory, the sound of my mother's sewing machine running late into the Ohio night, a noise synonymous with my childhood in Maple Ridge. We never had a grand, sweeping tragedy, just the slow, constant grind of insufficient funds. My parents, a mechanic and a seamstress, were rich in love, but perpetually poor in balance. Their favorite phrase, the one that became my guiding star, was, "Our girl is strong. She can handle it." That mantra, "I can handle it," was hammered into me early. I didn't see it as a burden. I saw it as a mandate for self-reliance. By the time I hit college, securing a spot at UCLA for data analytics, I was already a seasoned financial operator, while most students were navigating their first credit card application. I was juggling 3 part-time jobs, tutoring calculus, working at the campus library, and freelancing basic data entry for local businesses. Loans were minimal. I stitched together scholarships and grants like my mother stitched fabric. My student life was defined by the strict 10 by 10 foot room I rented off campus, smelling faintly of instant ramen and old paper. My luxury was not a new pair of shoes, but a fully updated, color-coded spreadsheet tracking every single cent. From age 20, I was meticulous. I didn't chase speculative stocks. I invested small, steady amounts into index funds. I understood compounding returns and the tyranny of compound interest. I knew exactly where I stood. I was the antithesis of the reckless spender, driven by a deep-seated terror of ever needing to ask someone else for money. This discipline got me through school and landed me a job at Kendricksa Insight Group, a boutique firm known for risk assessment. I quickly distinguished myself, not because I was brilliant at finding profit, but because I was unnervingly good at predicting where and how money would disappear. Then there was Tyler. I met him, inevitably, at a real estate investment summit in Los Angeles. I was there presenting Kendricksa's analysis on hidden liability risks in distressed residential portfolios. He was there because he was a Hale, the young prince of Hale Holdings, the man whose family owned half the sky in Southern California. Tyler Hale walked into a room and the air pressure changed. He was classically handsome, dressed in clothes that whispered custom made, rather than shouting designer brand. He was confident, easy, utterly accustomed to the gravitational pull of wealth. I, in my sensible navy suit and 5-year-old sensible heels, felt the immediate, unbridgeable chasm between us. He cornered me after my presentation. "Your analysis was fantastic, Aubrey," he said, leaning in. He smelled like expensive cologne and ambition. "You pointed out a vulnerability my own team completely missed." I kept my distance initially. Our first few dates felt like anthropological studies. I was analyzing his species, the truly rich. They didn't worry about money, they merely moved it. They didn't budget, they optimized tax structures. But Tyler was persistent. He didn't flash his cash. He emphasized my mind. "You're not like the women around me," he'd say. Over a dinner, I insisted on splitting, a habit he eventually laughed out of me. "They want the Hale name and access. You actually have your own engine. You don't need my dad's money. And that's what I love about you." It was that phrase, "you don't need my dad's money," that finally broke down my walls. He made me feel seen, not for the name he could bestow, but for the hard-won independence I already possessed. When he proposed, a whirlwind 6 months after we met, on his father's yacht near Santa Catalina Island, the class difference became impossible to ignore. His mother, Lydia Hale, a woman whose smile never quite reached her eyes, was the first to greet me. "Aubrey, darling," she'd purr, adjusting the diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist. "It's quite admirable when someone from the lower tiers works their way up, isn't it? Such a lovely story." It was a casual cruelty, wrapped in a compliment. It made my cheeks hot, filling me with a strange mixture of pride at my background and resentment for her effortless, almost condescending privilege. Every interaction with the Hales was like that. They admired my struggle, but only because they never had to participate in it. The wedding was a spectacle. It took place at one of Richard Hale's private resorts, costing more than my parents had earned in their entire lives combined, a figure I did the math on and immediately filed away. It felt less like a joining of two people and more like a merger between Tyler and the concept of an upwardly mobile, independent, non-threatening partner. During the reception, as the champagne flowed and the band played an orchestral version of some obscure pop hit, Richard Hale, the patriarch, cornered me by the dessert table. Richard is a man whose presence demands respect, a human calculator wrapped in Italian wool. He looked at me over a tiered platter of French macaroons, his expression surprisingly serious. "My son is good at ideas, Aubrey, not execution." I waited. He lowered his voice, just loud enough for me to hear over the din. "Sweetheart, always keep a separate ledger, and always keep your own money in accounts he can't touch." I laughed, thinking it was a bizarre, millionaire's dark humor, a warning from the old guard to the new. "Don't worry, Mr. Hale, I'm a data analyst. I always know where my money is." He didn't smile, he just nodded, a cryptic look in his eyes, and walked away. The biggest hurdle, the symbol of my complete capitulation, came just a week before the wedding, the prenuptial agreement. It was a document thicker than a college textbook, drafted by the Hale family's battalion of lawyers. I had it reviewed by a junior attorney friend, but the sheer volume of assets and legalese was overwhelming. Tyler had kissed my forehead, charming and reassuring. "It's just a formality, Ob. Dad makes us do it to protect the future trusts. It has nothing to do with us." Against every fiber of my analyst's being, I skimmed. I saw the clauses about separate property and initial assets. I saw that, should we divorce, I wouldn't be entitled to Hale Holdings stock. All reasonable. I thought, I trusted him, I loved him, I signed. It was the most expensive signature of my life. I signed away my right to financial autonomy with a flourish, believing in the man, not the contract. That signature was the seed of my future dependency, a tiny, almost invisible concession that Tyler would later use to attempt to cut the ground right out from under me. I told myself then, I don't need his money, I can handle it. Now, standing in the silent hallway of the townhome, with zero balance and a husband who just revoked my access, I realized just how naive my self-reliance had made me. I was so proud of my independence that I walked willingly into a cage, convinced I held the keys. The decision to leave Condrixa Insight Group was not a sudden plunge, but a slow, calculated leak of my professional identity. It happened 3 months after the wedding. Right as the honeymoon sheen was wearing thin, Tyler had presented it as a unified, exciting move toward our collective future, an investment in the Hale legacy. "The startup needs you, he'd insisted one evening, tracing patterns on my hand. "My administrative team is good, but they don't have your analytical depth. Come aboard full-time. You'll be co-founder on paper, responsible for logistics and compliance. When this platform launches, you'll earn way more than Condrixa pays. You'll be part of something ours." My boss at Condrixa had offered me a 20% raise and a promotion to senior consultant to stay. The money, I knew, was certain. The startup's promise was not. The analytical part of my brain screamed risk, but the newly married part whispered trust. I remembered Tyler's declaration that he loved my independence. He was asking me to trade one independence for a shared one, a better one. I wrestled with the decision for a week. I had enough liquid savings to last nearly 2 years if I was frugal, and the conviction that if the startup failed, my skills in data forensics were marketable enough to secure another high-paying job within 3 months. It felt like a calculated risk, betting on my husband and my own marketable talent. I resigned. It was the first domino. The second fell 2 weeks later, dressed in the guise of financial optimization. "I'm tired of managing all these different accounts," Tyler complained one morning, gesturing at a pile of statements. "Your old brokerage account, my inherited fund, the Hale Holdings operating account, the checking account for the house, it's inefficient." He proposed consolidating everything. "We'll move all the money under my primary Hale account. It simplifies the tax structure immensely, and my personal wealth advisor can manage it all under one umbrella. You'll still have the supplementary card for household spending. That way, I can track overall cash flow and maximize our investments." It sounded logical. It sounded smart, fiscally responsible. The Hale name conferred an image of stability and expertise. I agreed, signing the paperwork that converted my individual accounts, my own personal safety net, built painstakingly since I was 21, into joint accounts, where he was listed as the primary holder with full discretionary power. I had kept one secret, small brokerage account that I opened with a pseudonymous email years ago just for micro-investing. Holding maybe $10,000, a meager sum, but untouched. That little detail felt like a nervous reflex, not a strategic choice. From that day forward, the erosion of my equal standing began. Not with a bang, but with the slow, persistent drip of domestic responsibilities. I was meant to be the co-founder, but my days were filled with vendor management for the townhome, scheduling the landscapers, ordering supplies for Tyler's administrative team, and handling the logistics of the Hale family's constant stream of social commitments. All the critical documents, the lease agreement for the townhome, the titles to the luxury SUVs we leased, the paperwork for the startup's equity shares, came across my desk, but never with my name on the primary line. They were always signed by Tyler Hale or Hale Holdings LLC. I rationalized it as his expertise. His name opened more doors than mine ever could. The messaging wasn't just coming from Tyler. Lydia, my mother-in-law, was a master programmer of passive-aggressive advice. Every time I mentioned a spreadsheet or a financial calculation, she would interject sweetly. "Numbers are men's work, dear," she'd say over Sunday brunch, smoothing her silk blouse. "They thrive on carrying the burdens of the world's finances. Women are meant to keep the home, the hearth, and eventually the children. That's enough." It was constant, insidious reinforcement. Your value is domestic, his value is financial. After hearing it 50 times, you start to accept it as the unwritten rule of their world. Yet, my old habits refused to die. Every time Tyler signed a new contract or forwarded an email about an investment, I'd print a copy and file it. A professional reflex. I had an external hard drive, hidden deep in my wardrobe, where I maintained my old, complex, color-coded Excel file. I meticulously recorded every wire transfer, every joint expense, every time Tyler promised a 5% share of the company stock, along with the date and context of the promise. I was documenting the marriage like a slow-moving, high-stakes audit. The first cracks appeared 8 months into our marriage. Tyler started to become unreachable. His phone calls were muffled, hushed, and often taken in the garage or on the balcony. When I asked about the startup's funding rounds, he'd snap, "It's a hot deal. Aubrey, you wouldn't understand the volatility. Just trust the process." The patience he had once shown for my rigorous questioning vanished, replaced by a defensive wall. The incident that truly fractured my trust happened late one Tuesday night. I was going through the monthly credit card statement, the one linked to the supplementary card I still held, to reconcile the house budget. I saw a series of astronomical charges over a 4-day period in Las Vegas: private villa rental, exorbitant room service, and multiple withdrawals from an ATM conveniently located inside a high-limit casino. The total was nearly $45,000. It was far beyond any business trip or reasonable entertainment. I waited until morning. He walked in, still wearing his custom-made suit from the night before, slightly rumpled, smelling faintly of stale cigar smoke. "Vegas was productive?" I asked, holding the statement, my voice flat. He didn't flinch. He walked straight to the kitchen, poured coffee, and looked at me over the rim of the mug. It was necessary networking. Some high-net-worth individuals were involved in a private funding round for the platform. $45,000 necessary. Tyler? In 4 days? And what kind of networking involves the high-limit gaming floor, according to these ATM withdrawals? The mask dropped, his jaw tightened, and his eyes flashed with cold anger. "I'm the one who makes the money, Aubrey," he snarled, slamming the mug down. The ceramic clattered against the counter. "I earned it, and I have the right to spend it. If you're going to audit every dollar I spend on keeping this family afloat, maybe you should try contributing more than just buying organic lettuce." The sheer arrogance, the dismissal of my work, the entitlement to unilateral spending, and the deliberate lie left me reeling. The money wasn't the issue. It was the assertion of absolute control. I have the right. I didn't argue. I retreated. That night, the house felt enormous and terrifyingly empty. Tyler was already asleep, his breathing heavy and oblivious. I sat alone at the kitchen island, the pale light of the range hood casting harsh shadows. I opened my hidden laptop, pulled up my meticulously maintained financial spreadsheet, and scrolled through columns of income and expenditure that now mostly bore his name. At the bottom, in the notes section, I typed a single, desperate question, a calculation I had never dared to perform before. If I had to walk away tomorrow, what would I leave with? How much is left of the $10,000 I hid? Can I afford a lawyer? Can I afford to disappear? I stared at the screen for a full 10 minutes, my heart pounding against my ribs. The number was small, pathetically inadequate against the might of Hale Holdings, the fear of failure, the fear of poverty. The thing I had worked my whole life to avoid choked me. I knew the answer. I didn't have the courage yet. I closed the laptop, returning it to its hiding spot. But the question had been asked, the boundary had been crossed, and now the data was recorded, waiting for the courage to act upon it. The subtle friction caused by the Vegas scandal escalated swiftly into a full-blown crisis. Tyler, having dismissed my concerns about the $45,000 as spousal jealousy, suddenly became manic, consumed by his next big play. He called a meeting one Tuesday morning, less a discussion, more a decree. "We're going huge," he announced, pacing the townhome's immaculate living room. "The startup is officially pivoting. We're moving beyond just logistics. We're launching Hale Tech, a fractional investment platform for high-end coastal properties. Think crowdsourcing for mansions." The idea itself was brilliant, an appealing blend of tech and real estate that only someone with the Hale name could leverage. But my analytical radar immediately went up. This kind of scale required massive upfront capital, far more than the startup had generated in its 15 months of existence. That sounds like a $10 million ask just for Phase 1 server infrastructure and legal compliance, I pointed out, my voice measured. Where is the primary funding coming from? Is Richard backing this? Tyler stopped pacing, his eyes bright with a hungry, dangerous ambition. No, I'm doing this on my own terms. The banks love the concept, but they're playing hardball on the collateral. They want skin in the game that's clean and liquid. He gestured toward the high-rise view visible from our window, not the townhome we currently occupied, but the panoramic silhouette of Summit Heights, where Tyler owned a spectacular, fully furnished condo. That condo, he had assured me, was his personal nest egg. They're requiring the Summit Heights property as the primary security for the loan, he continued. It's valued at roughly $6 million, and that covers most of it. But to sweeten the deal and drop the interest rate by a full 1.5%, they need an additional guarantor. He walked over to me, placing his hands on my shoulders, his grip a little too firm. That's where you come in. Your credit score is flawless. It's never been touched. If you co-sign the loan, even as a nominal guarantor, the bank gets the reassurance they need, and we save tens of thousands in interest payments over the life of the loan. It's a purely strategic move. The word guarantor felt like a cold stone settling in my stomach. Co-signing wasn't just strategic. It was a legal noose. If Hailtech failed, and the Summit Heights condo wasn't enough to cover the debt, the bank would come after me. Aubrey Clark, the person with the flawless credit score, my past independence, ironically, made me the perfect, clean legal pawn. Tyler, I need to see the full terms of the loan documentation, I insisted, pulling away slightly. Specifically, the priority of liability. What happens if the project crashes? Who takes the first hit after the collateral is liquidated? His patience snapped. The charm evaporated instantly, replaced by the same cold fury he had shown when I questioned the Vegas spending. Unbelievable, he spat, throwing his hands up. We've been married for over a year, and you still treat this like a hostile corporate takeover. Are you actually worried about a condo that's already mine? Are you telling me you trust the bank more than you trust your own husband? You'd rather see us pay a higher interest rate because you're scared of losing some hypothetical money? The fight went on for nearly an hour, a brutal, emotional tug-of-war where he weaponized my skepticism. It's always about the money with you, isn't it? He accused, his voice rising. I thought you were different, but underneath the smart girl from Ohio, you're just another person scared of risk. You're afraid of losing a few dollars more than you're afraid of losing me. The situation was aggravated by an untimely call from his mother, Lydia. Tyler vented to her, and she immediately called me back, dripping with disappointment. Aubrey, really? She chastised. Tyler is creating an empire. The Hale men take risks for success. A wife's duty is to support that. You cannot let your little middle-class fears undermine a $10 million opportunity. It's about trust, dear, trust and family loyalty. Her intervention added a layer of profound pressure. It wasn't just Tyler against me. It was the entire infrastructure of the Hale family demanding my compliance. That night, Tyler came home late, carrying a large briefcase. He looked exhausted, but his eyes held a steely, desperate intensity. He dumped a thick stack of papers, the loan documents, onto the kitchen island where I was sorting through old invoices. Sign it now, Aubrey, he ordered, his voice low and heavy. We need to submit this by tomorrow morning. I've been negotiating all day. I'm done. I was tired, mentally drained by the constant accusations and the overwhelming complexity of the documents. It was exactly the moment he wanted, when my resistance was low and my sense of confusion was high. But as I reached for the pen, Richard Hale's strange, cryptic warning from our wedding night flashed in my mind. Sweetheart, remember always, keep your own money in accounts he can't touch. The simple recollection acted like a jolt of espresso, clearing the fog. Read the fine print. My training. The disciplined analyst in me took over. I ignored Tyler's impatient tapping foot and started scanning the clauses. Not for the interest rate, but for the liability language. I focused on Section 3A, the guarantor clause. It was a masterpiece of legal deception. The language was deliberately convoluted, but the outcome was chillingly clear. I, as the secondary guarantor, was being made jointly and severally liable for the debt, even if the primary account holder's assets were exhausted. Furthermore, there was a specific rider, buried on page 19, which stipulated that should Tyler's personal guarantee be voided due to bankruptcy, fraud, or a legal challenge against Hale Holdings, my personal responsibility would immediately elevate to 100% of the remaining liability. Tyler had structured the loan so that if he failed or committed a financial misstep, I would become his legal shield, bearing the full brunt of the disaster. I lowered the pen. The blood was pounding in my ears. "I won't sign this," I said, looking up, my voice steady. Tyler looked genuinely stunned. "I won't sign it," I repeated. "This contract makes me solely responsible for your debt if your guarantee is invalidated. You've structured this to put all the risk on me. Tyler, you can't tell me this is about saving 1.5% interest." His face contorted in a mask of betrayal and rage. He didn't try to deny the clause. He just attacked the fact that I had found it. "You've been auditing me again, haven't you?" he yelled. "You think I'm trying to fleece you? This is standard, Aubrey, standard procedure for maximizing leverage. If you can't trust me on this, then you don't trust our marriage at all." He grabbed the briefcase, swept the loan documents off the island, and stormed out the door, slamming it so hard the windows rattled. He didn't come back that night. The townhome was filled with a thick, ominous silence, the sound of a marriage shattering, unheard by the outside world. The next morning, Tyler returned, his rage replaced by a terrifying, studied neutrality. He acted as though the confrontation never happened, making a point of using his own credit card to buy me a fancy coffee maker. He avoided mentioning the loan documents entirely. The topic was closed, for now. But I was wide awake. The refusal to sign had peeled back the final layer of pretense. Later that afternoon, I was walking past the home office when I overheard a snippet of a phone call. Tyler's voice was tight and panicky, the confident Hale facade completely gone. "Dad's pulled the line, man," he muttered into the phone. "He reduced the credit limit to practically zero. He's not letting me draw any more funds from the family trust until I can show him actual profit, not just projections. I have to find another way to cover the overhead for the launch. I have to find a way to pivot. He's running on empty." The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Tyler wasn't the powerful young tycoon offering me a small, loving risk. He was a desperate man whose father had already cut off his allowance. Scrambling to find a legally clean, credit-worthy sucker to cover his rapidly accumulating debt, I was more than a pawn. I was a lifeboat. That night, lying in bed, the distant sounds of the waves from the Pacific crashing in the quiet night, I no longer saw Tyler as the wealthy prince. I saw him as a gambler running out of chips. The need for the loan, the urgency, the manipulative guilt-tripping. It wasn't about the startup's success. It was about his personal solvency and his need to hide his financial desperation from Richard. I knew then that I had to act, not just to leave, but to protect myself from the impending crash. The next morning, before Tyler woke up, I retrieved my hidden laptop and external drive. I didn't just file the documents. I photographed every page of the rejected loan contract, every email where Tyler had promised me equity, every invoice, and every financial statement I could physically access. I created mirror copies of the digital evidence. Then, I opened a completely clean, anonymous email account I had created years ago but never used. I attached the entire zip file of evidence and pressed send. I was sending a secure, dated record to myself, ensuring that even if Tyler found my hidden drive or smashed my computer, the evidence of his manipulation and deception would exist on a server somewhere, traceable back to me. They want to play a game of high finance and personal liability, I thought, closing the laptop and listening to the even breathing of the man beside me, fine, but from now on, I keep score. The moment I dropped that bag of groceries and Tyler announced my financial castration, the passive manipulation ended, and the open warfare began. "It's temporary, Aubrey," Tyler had stated, leaning against the counter the morning after the supermarket incident. His tone was dismissive, almost paternal. "You have a tendency toward emotional spending, especially with the high cost of living right now. Until we get the Hail Tech launch off the ground, I need to keep the accounts clean. No access for you, effective immediately. It's for your own good." I saw the lie shimmering in his eyes. It wasn't about my spending. It was about asserting total, brutal dominance. I was no longer resisting his loan documents, so he was moving to the next stage, making me utterly dependent on his good grace. The next communication came not from him, but from the fortress, an email, arriving precisely at 9 in the morning, bearing the Hale family crest and the chillingly neutral letterhead of Marcus & Associates, their family law firm. The subject line was simply, "Account clarification and asset protection." The body, drafted in polite, precise legalese, was anything but polite. It clarified the intent of the prenuptial agreement, highlighting the clauses that protected Tyler's premarital and inherited wealth. The true sting, however, was in the closing paragraph. "Be advised that any attempt by Ms. Clark to access or liquidate assets belonging to the Hale estate, or any associated LLCs or trusts, without prior written consent from Mr. Tyler Hale, will be considered an act of intrusion and will be met with immediate legal injunction." It was a veiled threat. They didn't just cut me off. They were preemptively warning me against fighting back. They wanted me cornered, legally, physically, and financially. The campaign to control the narrative began simultaneously. Lydia Hale, the master strategist of social perception, was the general. She didn't call me. She called my relatives, my old college friends, and, most effectively, the wives of Tyler's business associates. The story she spun was a masterpiece of misdirection. She painted me not as a victim of financial abuse, but as an uncontrollable liability. Poor Tyler, she would supposedly lament to her circle. He had to take drastic measures. Aubrey just didn't understand the value of money. She was wildly extravagant, spending tens of thousands on clothes and trinkets, forcing Tyler to protect the family trust before she bankrupted his future inheritance. Such a shame she couldn't appreciate the opportunity she was given. Within 2 days, my phone started buzzing with messages from people I barely knew. A friend of a friend on Instagram posted, "Some people really think they're entitled to a queen's ransom just because they said, 'I do. Know your lane, ladies.'" A thinly veiled status update from one of Tyler's associates' wives read, "It's hard to watch someone throw away a perfectly good life because they confuse having a sugar daddy with having a partner. Tyler is finally doing the right thing for his own sanity." The sheer volume of insinuation made me feel exposed and judged. The narrative had been hijacked. To the world. I wasn't the hard-working analyst who had built her life from nothing. I was the gold digger who had been caught and publicly stripped of her allowance. I tried to go straight to the top. I wrote a polite, formal email to Richard Hale's private address, detailing the Vegas spending, the coercive loan documents, and my subsequent lack of access to basic living funds. I hoped the Titan would intervene on the basis of protecting his own reputation or, perhaps, based on his cryptic advice at the wedding. Richard's executive assistant, a woman named Ms. Thorne, replied within an hour, "Mr. Hale is currently engaged in high-level mergers and acquisitions and is unavailable. If you have a legal issue, please direct all correspondence through Marcus & Associates." The door was slammed shut. Richard, the only Hale who seemed to value numbers over lineage, was either too busy or choosing his son over me. Tyler intensified the psychological pressure at home. He stopped providing money for essentials. "Need milk? Go buy it," he'd say, gesturing to his wallet on the counter. But when I reached for it, he'd quickly snatch it away. "Oh, I forgot. You want to prove you're independent, don't you? You always bragged about being able to support yourself. Well, here's your chance. Aubrey, go earn it. The $700,000 you made at Kendrixa is a drop in the ocean compared to what I manage. Go show me that middle-class income of yours." His mockery of my past, the very thing he had once claimed to admire, was the deepest cut. He was deliberately attempting to trigger my oldest fears of financial insecurity. The narrative even reached back to Ohio. One evening, my Aunt Carol from my hometown called, her voice small and hesitant. "Aubrey, honey, I hate to ask, but Lydia Hale called your mother," she said. "She said you're demanding half of Tyler's family inheritance and that you're forcing him into a messy divorce." A raw, painful cry lodged in my throat. I spent 30 minutes explaining to my aunt that I wasn't asking for Hale inheritance, just basic legal protection and access to the shared funds I helped create. But the damage was done. The Hales had weaponized the narrative so effectively that they had turned my own family against me, making me sound like a greedy, entitled villain. During a particularly nasty confrontation, when I pressed him on why he had cut off the account that held my residual earnings, Tyler's control finally slipped. "Look, you're a liability," he shouted, grabbing my arm, his eyes wild. "The bank rejected the loan after I tried to sign off on the first round of documents without your cosign. They started asking questions. Dad is already furious about the Vegas debt, and he said, quote, 'If you can't clear up your Aubrey problem, I will review your entire right to succession. You're not my wife right now, Aubrey. You're a legal risk I need to manage before I lose the entire kingdom.'" The words hung in the air. Aubrey problem, legal risk. I was not his partner, not his wife, not even a person with emotional standing. I was a structural flaw in his financial strategy, a potential claimant who needed to be silenced, marginalized, and dismissed as a gold digger before Richard Hale revoked his birthright. The entire hostile campaign, the emails, the social media whispers, the cutting off of funds, was designed to isolate me, diminish my credibility, and force me into a position where I would sign anything to make the pain stop. I spent the rest of the evening standing on the balcony of the luxurious, high-end townhome we rented, the home that held not a single document with my name on it. The cold night air of Harborview was a sharp contrast to the stifling realization. If Tyler decided to change the locks tomorrow, legally, I was almost completely empty-handed. I was standing in a $5 million gilded cage, with nothing but the contents of my purse and my increasingly shaky confidence. They had won the first battle by seizing the funds, and they were winning the second by seizing the story. The time for silent scorekeeping was over. It was time to start planning my escape and my counterattack. The icy grip of fear and humiliation finally shattered, replaced by the cool, clear focus of an analyst facing a hostile takeover. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't negotiate with Tyler or the Hales on their terms. Their game was public humiliation and financial strangulation. My game would be silent, surgical extraction. My first move was to reestablish my financial foundation. I sent a discreet email to Daniel Sterling, my old boss at Kendrixa Insight Group, simply stating that I was looking for contract work, effective immediately. I knew he was overwhelmed. His reply arrived within 30 minutes. "Aubrey, thank God. Forget contract work. I need you back. We just lost our lead risk consultant to a competitor. Can you start Monday? Remote for now. But I need your expertise on the new hedge fund compliance project. I'll match your old salary and give you a $10,000 signing bonus." It wasn't Hale money, but it was my money. Clean, earned, and controlled solely by me. I accepted instantly, the return to the corporate world, to the clean logic of data and risk assessment, felt like a deep, cleansing breath. Next, securing a physical escape route. While Tyler was at his downtown office, attempting to charm investors, I was quietly moving. I used the remaining $8,000 from my hidden micro-investment account to secure a month-to-month lease on a tiny sunless studio apartment in Brookline Court, a humble, secure neighborhood 20 minutes inland from Harborview. The lease was signed under my maiden name, Aubrey Clark, with no mention of Hale. Over the next 3 nights, I systematically emptied the townhome of anything irreplaceable. My old laptop, my hidden external drive containing the mirrored evidence, my family photos, and my minimal wardrobe were transferred to the Brookline Court studio. Tyler was so consumed by his own financial troubles and so certain that my lack of funds had paralyzed me that he never noticed the subtle shift in the closet space. Then came the legal war planning. I knew I couldn't use the Hale family's legal firm, but I needed a pit bull, someone who understood the intricate dance of high net worth divorce and asset concealment. Through a discreet referral from Daniel, I found Marisol Grant. Marisol was known in the legal community as the woman who routinely dismantled predatory prenup agreements crafted by old money families. I met her in her quiet, impeccably organized office downtown. I presented her with the thick prenuptial agreement, the printed loan rejection documents, my meticulous Excel file, and the evidence of the Vegas spending. She spent a good hour scanning the papers, occasionally making rapid-fire notes on a yellow legal pad. When she finished the prenup, she didn't look solemn or concerned. She started to laugh. It wasn't a loud, malicious laugh, but a low, delighted chuckle. "They thought they trapped you, didn't they, Ms. Clark? They relied on you trusting the big picture and ignoring the fine print," Marisol said, adjusting her reading glasses. "But look closely at Section 4C, the Earned Income Clause." She pointed to a line of text that had blurred into the rest of the jargon for me. The clause, placed deep within the document, stipulated that any and all income earned personally by Aubrey Clark during the marriage, from sources not related to Hale Holdings, shall remain the sole and separate property of Aubrey Clark, and is exempt from any marital community claim. "Richard Hale wrote this, or at least he insisted on it," Marisol explained, her finger tracing the text. "This clause is bulletproof. It ensures that your salary from Kendricksa and any subsequent earnings can never be touched by Tyler. He was looking out for his son. Yes, but more importantly, Richard Hale always respects an independent money stream. He created a small escape hatch for you." The implication was staggering. Richard Hale hadn't been kidding at the wedding. He had provided a single, narrow path to financial survival, knowing that his son might one day prove to be incompetent or reckless. Marisol and I then moved on to my data. We cross-referenced my Excel spreadsheet with the bank notification of my account's ownership change, the rejected loan documents, and the email copies I had saved. "This is beautiful, Aubrey," Marisol said, tapping the printout of the rejected loan application. "Here's where Tyler crossed the line from coercion to outright fraud. He submitted credit application documents for the failed loan, and he included your personal credit history and income projections from Kendricksa, data he only had access to because of your former shared status, after you explicitly refused to co-sign. This suggests he used your identity, or at least your confidential data, under false pretenses to try and secure favorable terms, even after your refusal." She leaned back, a predator assessing her prey. "He thinks he's simply cut off his wife, but Tyler Hale has just provided us with enough evidence for a high-level corporate fraud investigation, not to mention grounds for divorce based on financial cruelty and potential identity misuse. He's in a desperate spiral, and he's making big, sloppy mistakes." Marisol's advice became the core of my strategy. We wait. The longer he thinks you are weak, broke, and paralyzed by fear, the more mistakes he will make. He needs to believe his campaign of public shaming and financial starvation has worked. We will not move until the moment he makes his next fatal, legal error. I returned to the Brookline Court studio that evening. A woman fundamentally transformed. I was working again, earning a salary directly deposited into a new, separate bank account. My home was small. The walls were thin, and the smell of the supermarket was gone, replaced by the clean, quiet scent of old wood and paint. It was humble, but it was mine. I watched Tyler from a distance, maintaining a facade of defeat. I drove my old Acura back to the townhome every morning to ensure he didn't realize I had moved out my essentials. I allowed him to believe I was struggling to pay for gasoline, still begging him for money, confirming his superiority. They thought they had severed my lifeline and left me drifting. They had no idea they had merely cut the mooring line of a ship I was already preparing to sail. The cage door wasn't locked. I had opened it myself, and now I was simply waiting for the perfect tidal moment to step out and watch them drown in the wake. The call came on a chilly Thursday afternoon, just as I was wrapping up a remote session with Daniel at Kendricksa. It wasn't Ms. Thorne, the dismissive assistant. It was a woman with a voice like fine crystal, cutting through the background noise of my small studio apartment. "Ms. Clark, this is Ms. Avery, personal assistant to Mr. Richard Hale. Mr. Hale would like to invite you to his private office at Hale Tower for a meeting tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. He requests your presence to hear your side of the story." My heart hammered against my ribs. It was the first direct contact since the wedding. I felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with pure dread. Was this the trap? I immediately called Marisol Grant. "Go," Marisol instructed, her voice calm and firm. "But you go as an observer, not a supplicant. Say nothing that isn't already documented. Do not sign anything. Do not accept a check. And remember every word, every gesture. Richard Hale is not sentimental. If he's inviting you, it's because his son has created a risk he can't ignore." The next morning, I dressed in my most professional, neutral suit, a black pantsuit I'd bought with my first big bonus at Kendricksa. It was my armor. Hale Tower was everything the townhome wasn't: permanent, imposing, and radiating absolute power. The security alone was tighter than a Federal Reserve. I was ushered up to the 80th floor, where Richard Hale's private office occupied the entire east wing. The office was a study in controlled dominance. Walls of floor-to-ceiling glass offered a dizzying 360-degree panorama of the entire coastline, from Harborview to downtown LA. The interior was minimalist: dark wood, brushed steel, a single, abstract expressionist painting that cost more than my entire extended family. I saw the class chasm again, but this time, the awe was replaced by analytical calculation. This was the headquarters of the machine that was trying to crush me. Richard Hale was waiting by the window, a towering figure even in his late 60s. He didn't offer a handshake, just a sharp nod toward the leather chair across a wide, dark mahogany desk. He wasted no time on pleasantries. His voice was low, gravelly, and commanded the vast silence of the office. "I have heard two stories. Aubrey, my daughter-in-law, who suddenly became hysterically extravagant, forcing my son to protect his assets, and my son, who claims he's merely reorganizing his finances before the big launch, but whose credit exposure is suddenly concerning my personal auditor." He paused, his gaze piercing. "Now, I want the third story, your story, and it better be backed by numbers, not emotion." I didn't try to cry, or plead, or justify my past spending. I became the risk consultant I was hired to be. "Mr. Hale, the issue is not expense, but unilateral revocation of access, followed by the manipulation of legal liability. On date, Tyler zeroed the accounts and used his mother to propagate a libelous narrative to protect himself from the debt he already incurred in Vegas and from a funding gap he tried to fill with my signature." I reached into my briefcase and smoothly placed 3 printed, unattached pages on his desk. A printout of the rejected loan clause where my liability was elevated. The screenshot of the casino hotel charges from the joint card. My meticulously dated spreadsheet showing Tyler's financial volatility over the last 8 months. Richard picked up the pages, his expression unreadable, and scanned them quickly. He didn't question the data. He only assessed its validity. After what felt like 5 minutes of tense silence, he slowly pushed my printouts back toward me. He then opened a sleek, hidden drawer in his desk and pulled out a much thicker file. Bound in dark blue leather, he placed it squarely in front of me, its weight substantial. "Aubrey," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, cutting through the silence of the 80th floor. His eyes, the color of cold steel, met mine. "In this entire city, in this entire family, you are the only one who is not broke. My son is the sinkhole." The twist was so profound, so absolute that it took my breath away. Tyler wasn't the powerful rich man being cautious. He was the desperate, drowning man. Richard slid the file open, revealing a detailed summary. I cut Tyler off. Effectively, 1 year ago, I discovered a pattern of high-stakes gambling tied to a failed, unauthorized foreign investment. I lowered his private trust credit limit from $10 million to less than $200,000 until he could prove competence. His startup is merely a frantic attempt to cover the losses he accrued trying to maintain his lifestyle. He pointed to a page labeled Outstanding Liabilities. It showed Tyler's personal debt soaring over $4 million, excluding the failed venture capital loans. The cutoff of your access? That was Tyler's own desperate attempt to conserve the remaining operating capital and to force you to co-sign the new debt, intending to use you as a financial shield, as the one with clean credit who would take the fall when the Hail-Tech house of cards collapses. Richard then played a short audio file from his desktop, a recording of a recent phone call. Tyler's voice, ragged and whining, filled the silent room. "She won't sign. Dad, she's being a nightmare. If the bitch leaves, she leaves with nothing anyway. She grew up poor. She won't dare make a fuss. She's used to having nothing." The contempt in his voice, the casual dehumanization, solidified the cold rage in my core. I was nothing more than a class stereotype to him. Richard stopped the recording and looked at me, his gaze softening slightly, but remaining utterly serious. "He is a liability. Aubrey, he has been for a long time. Now, I have laid out the truth. The Hales never leave debt or scandal to fester. We clean it up. I am offering you 2 paths," he stated, his voice firming up. A return to business. Option 1. You leave immediately. I have a severance package ready. A substantial, tax-free sum, far exceeding the prenup's obligation, paid in full upon signature, along with a confidentiality agreement that includes a non-disparagement clause protecting your reputation from his mother's smear campaign. He pushed a thick manila envelope across the desk. It looked like freedom. Option 2. You stay. You become my asset. You use that analytical mind to help me surgically dismantle his failing platform and quietly transfer the necessary assets back into protected trusts before the entire thing goes bankrupt. You help me clean up his mess. But if you choose to stay, I warn you, the game becomes ruthless. You will be actively working against my son and his mother, and it will be a far rougher battle than a clean divorce. I looked at the envelope, the promise of immediate, peaceful escape. Then I looked at the debt ledger, the evidence of Tyler's arrogance, and the memory of the sheer humiliation in the supermarket line. Escape was good, but justice, and the ability to dismantle the man who thought I was too poor to fight back, was far better. I pushed the envelope back toward the billionaire. "Mr. Hale," I said, my voice steady, my training kicking in one last time. "I'm a risk consultant. I don't liquidate assets prematurely. I prefer to maximize the recovery and minimize future exposure. I choose option 2. My decision to choose option 2, the path of war, was not made lightly in Richard Hale's opulent office. It was a cold calculation. Escape offered peace, but staying offered vindication, and more importantly, protection against the catastrophic collapse Tyler was driving toward. Before committing, I spent the rest of the day in a lockdown session with Marisol Grant, conveying Richard's entire exposé, including the astounding revelation that Tyler, the prince, was actually sinking under $4 million in personal debt. Marisol was ecstatic. Richard Hale is a monster, Aubrey, but he's a predictable monster who follows the money. He sees Tyler as a lost cause and you as a viable business partner. We proceed, but we draft our own terms. We immediately drafted a concise agreement outlining my conditions for cooperation with Richard. 1. That my legal safety and separation from Tyler's debt must be guaranteed in writing. 2. That my role would remain strictly analytical and advisory, ensuring I had no emotional obligation to the family. And 3. That any funds recovered on my behalf, like the money Tyler had taken, would be held in escrow under my sole control. Richard, Receiving the document the following morning, signed it without a single amendment. He respected the strategic move. Then came the second massive twist, the foundation of the true countertrap. "There's one more thing you should know," Richard stated during a follow-up call, his voice businesslike. "When you married my son, I established a small, private trust fund in your name, just under $2 million. It was fully independent, managed by a fiduciary outside Hale Holdings, structured to provide a modest income should Tyler ever do something monumentally stupid. It's completely separate from the prenup, and nobody, not Tyler, not Lydia, knows it exists, except for my personal counsel and now, you." The knowledge of the trust, my true, untouchable financial floor, was intoxicating. It meant my current struggle was purely theater. I wasn't risking everything. I was risking nothing. The game was now pure performance art. The plan was simple, vicious, and elegant. I would intensify the act of the broke, abandoned wife. The Hales needed to believe they had successfully crippled me, because desperate people become sloppy people. I moved back to the townhome, maintaining the small studio apartment in Brookline Court as my secret operational base. The performance began immediately. Tyler, sensing my continued presence meant compliance, became arrogant. "You realize you have no choice, right?" he sneered over dinner one night. "You have no income, Ob. You have to rely on my allowance." I played the role perfectly. I sighed, dramatically checked my nearly empty physical wallet, and started planting clues. I called a close friend, Sarah, loudly enough for Tyler to overhear, fabricating a dramatic sob story. "I'm sorry, I just need $800 for rent for the new studio I'm looking at. He cut me off completely. I don't know how I'll even pay for my old Acura's insurance this month." The mention of selling personal assets was particularly potent bait. I casually mentioned to Tyler that I was talking to a dealer about offloading my only significant piece of jewelry, a vintage gold watch my own grandfather had given me, just to cover living expenses for 3 months. This convinced him that I was cornered, that I was digging into my most sentimental reserves, and crucially, that I had no knowledge of Richard's protective trust. He believed the only way out was through him. With his confidence soaring, Tyler began his endgame. He needed me to sign documents to clean up his own fiscal mess, and he believed my desperation was his key. "Listen, Ob," he started one afternoon, displaying a sickly sweet patience. "I know things are tight, but I need you to sign a few documents for the tax accountant. They relate to some early expenses of the startup. It's just paperwork to show a clean separation of initial seed capital. It helps me save over $100,000 on last year's write-offs." The paperwork was, in reality, a transfer of liability, subtly moving his personal, unauthorized business expenses onto a legal entity that could potentially trace back to my signature. Each time he presented a document, a tax rider, a joint account transfer, or a new statement confirming my lack of authority, I would perform the weary, defeated signature. But before every signing, I meticulously recorded the interaction on the hidden voice recorder in my purse, took high-resolution photos of the documents, and sent copies of everything to Marisol and Richard's private server. I was creating a time-stamped, verifiable log of his fraud and continued coercion. Marisol was delighted. "He's practically handing us the case on a silver platter. He is attempting fraud with the belief that the victim is too financially intimidated to fight back. Keep collecting, Aubrey. Every signature is a nail in his coffin." The final piece of emotional kindling was thrown onto the fire by Lydia. She arrived unannounced, bearing not venom, but a sickeningly saccharine concern. "Darling, I know this is hard," she cooed, touching my arm, a gesture of intimacy she had never offered before. "But you must understand Tyler. He's stressed. Why don't you just apologize to him? Accept the situation. Stop talking about your old career. Men are the primary providers, the backbone. Just admit that it's easier if the man handles the money, and this whole nasty business will stop." Her soft-spoken insistence that I accept dependency and apologize for my own financial competence didn't wound me. It solidified my cold resolve. She didn't want peace. She wanted my complete intellectual and financial surrender, thereby validating her entire worldview. That night, alone in the small Brookline Court studio, I looked at my reflection in the cheap bathroom mirror. I saw a woman dressed in humble clothes, living in a space a fraction the size of the townhome's kitchen, yet holding a $2 million trust, a high-paying job, and a briefcase full of legal nuclear weapons. I stared at myself and whispered, "This time, I'm not just protecting myself. I'm going to make his entire world bear witness to who the true dependent is." The final confrontation was scheduled. The Hale Gala was 1 week away, a magnificent, public display of the power Tyler believed he was about to inherit. I was ready to walk into the center of the kingdom, playing the role of the beggar, only to reveal that the prince himself was the one who was truly bankrupt. The air in the grand ballroom of the Riverton Bay Hotel was thick with the scent of lilies, money, and expectation. This was the annual Hale Gala, the event where power was showcased and futures were sealed. Tyler believed this was his coronation, the moment Richard would publicly anoint him as the heir and future CEO of the modernized Hale real estate empire. I arrived precisely at 7:30 in the evening. My invitation, delivered with a subtle cruelty, assigned me a table near the back, adjacent to the minor partners and second-tier investment managers. It was a calculated move by Lydia to signal my lowered social standing, the disgraced, financially dependent wife. My dress was deliberate, a simple, well-tailored dark silk sheath, purchased years ago with my own Kendricksa bonus. No diamonds, no flash. I was not there to compete with the Hale women's glittering display of debt. I was there to conduct an audit. I walked in alone, every step measured, feeling the cold weight of my secret strategy. Tyler was the centerpiece of the room. He was a vision in a custom navy tuxedo. His hair slicked back, radiating a false confidence. He stood near the entrance, surrounded by reporters, giving glossy soundbites about his young vision and the launch of Hale Tech. Lydia was right beside him, perfectly coiffed, her hand resting possessively on his forearm, her smile tight with maternal triumph. She looked like the queen consort of the coming era. I made my way to the assigned table, acknowledging a few sympathetic nods and several openly contemptuous glares. The plan was working. Everyone believed I was the broken gold digger clinging to the scraps. As the pre-dinner mingling peaked, the social predators descended. 3 of the most prominent wives in Tyler's circle approached my table, their expressions a mixture of pity and smug judgment. "Aubrey, darling, you look, well, tired," sneered Clarissa, wife of a major investor. "We heard about the card situation. So awkward. It happens to everyone when you get too comfortable, doesn't it?" "You know, it's really for the best," another woman chimed in, leaning close. "Tyler is a genius. He needs to protect the estate. It's normal, dear. Marriage is like that. The man takes care of the serious numbers. Don't worry, you'll adjust." The implicit condescension, the belief that I had been demoted and had no recourse, was palatable. I simply smiled, a thin, chilling smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I've always adjusted. Clarissa, I usually start by adjusting the balance sheets." They laughed, thinking it was a joke of poor taste. They had no idea they were providing the final, crucial confirmation that the narrative was fully internalized. The stage was set. At 8:45, the lights dimmed, the room hushed, anticipating Tyler's grand entrance, but the familiar, imposing figure of Richard Hale walked onto the stage, 15 minutes ahead of schedule and entirely unannounced. The crowd stirred. Richard approached the podium, his presence instantly silencing the room. He bypassed the planned introduction and grabbed the microphone, his voice echoing with authority. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, we were supposed to celebrate the future of Hale Holdings, and we still will. But before we discuss expansion, we must first address the matter of liability and trust. This is an announcement that will affect the entire future of the Hale name." He gestured to the massive digital screen behind him, which usually displayed the Hale Holdings logo. The logo vanished, replaced by the grim, clean lines of a PowerPoint slide. The slide was titled, Tyler Hale, Hidden Liabilities and Mismanagement Overview. A collective gasp swept through the ballroom. The first image was a complex flow chart detailing Tyler's personal debt, complete with red arrows pointing to the $4 million sum. The second slide showed screenshots of his desperate emails to Richard, begging for the credit line to be reinstated. The third was a copy of the $45,000 Vegas casino transaction, with the ATM withdrawal time circled in stark red. Richard spoke without inflection, his voice acting as the cold narrator of his son's destruction. My son, Tyler Hale, has operated under the false premise that the Hale name is a guarantee against accountability. For over a year, he has mismanaged his capital, diverted funds, and accrued personal debt through reckless speculation. Tyler, who had been watching from his table near the front, finally registered the total disaster unfolding. He lunged toward the stage, his face white with fury and panic. "Dad, what the hell are you doing? This is proprietary," he roared, attempting to grab the microphone stand. Richard's security team, strategically placed near the stage, moved with instantaneous precision. They intercepted Tyler before he reached the podium, holding him firmly by the arms, forcing him to stand and watch the public evisceration. Richard waited until Tyler stopped struggling, then continued, his voice heavy with finality. Effective immediately, Tyler Hale has been stripped of all executive authority, officer titles, and access to all operational accounts within Hale Holdings and its subsidiaries, all assets and properties tied to his ventures, including the Hale Tech platform, will be placed under immediate receivership and auditing. He paused, letting the silence scream. Then, he looked directly at the crowd, the elite who had believed the gossip about me. Furthermore, my son recently attempted to coerce his wife, Aubrey Clark, into co-signing a disastrous loan, structuring the agreement to transfer 100% of his liability onto her. This was done while simultaneously circulating malicious rumors of her supposed financial recklessness, the very recklessness he himself was demonstrating. He stepped away from the podium and looked across the room, past the glittering chandeliers, until his eyes found mine at the back table. "Aubrey," he announced, his voice carrying the full weight of the Hale empire. "Please join me on stage." My legs felt steady. I rose, walking toward the stage with the calm precision of a data analyst delivering a final factual report. I didn't rush. I didn't look at Tyler, who was now being physically restrained, his face contorted in a silent scream of impotent rage. Once I stood beside Richard, he turned to the screen one last time. The slide changed to a single, bold graphic. Aubrey Clark, independent and secure. While my son was burning through millions, Aubrey was working diligently, Richard stated. She has maintained a spotless credit profile, secured new, legitimate employment, and unbeknownst to Tyler, has been the sole recipient of a separate, protected trust I established upon their marriage, a trust that now stands at over $2 million. He looked out over the stunned, silent room, finally addressing the gossip head-on. "You were told that Aubrey was the gold digger who was cut off. I am here to tell you that Aubrey Clark is the only financially solvent person my son has ever married. She is not the liability. She is the most valuable asset that Tyler Hale tried to destroy." He then placed a hand on my shoulder. "Aubrey Clark will be the independent overseer of the audit into Tyler's financial activities, acting in an advisory capacity to the holdings board. We believe she is the only person who can accurately calculate his liabilities." The gasps this time were louder, filled not with judgment, but with sheer, awestruck realignment. The eyes of every socialite, every investor, every gossip columnist snapped back to me. I was no longer the pauper. I was the unexpected, strategically positioned power player. Tyler Hale was the prince who had been publicly revealed as the beggar. He watched from the floor, immobilized by his own father's security, the reality of his total downfall setting in. The stage was mine. The velvet curtains of the gala stage had barely closed when Tyler burst into the small holding room backstage, his face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. "You destroyed me!" he shrieked, his voice ragged. "You and him! You conspired with my father to ruin my life. You're just a spiteful middle-class bitch." I stood perfectly still, my silk dress a shield. I did not raise my voice, matching his emotional explosion with the cold, hard logic of my professional background. "I didn't destroy you, Tyler," I stated simply. "You destroyed yourself with gambling, debt, and delusion." I placed a slim folder on the table between us. "And I didn't conspire with your father. I simply provided him with the financial analysis of your insolvency, backed by the evidence you created." The folder contained copies of everything: the loan clause where he transferred 100% of the liability to me, the screenshot of the Vegas charges, and the transcript of his conversation saying I was used to having nothing. At that moment, Marisol Grant and two of Richard Hale's corporate attorneys entered the room. The atmosphere immediately shifted from domestic drama to legal execution. Marisol pushed a second, thicker file toward Tyler. "This is a settlement agreement. Mr. Hale, if you agree to an immediate, uncontested divorce on grounds of irreconcilable differences and cease all legal and social attacks on Aubrey's character, you will receive a small, non-traceable stipend to start over. It's enough to cover your current minor debts." She leveled her gaze at him. "Refuse this agreement, and every piece of evidence of fraud, identity misuse, and financial endangerment will be simultaneously filed with the police and the Internal Revenue Service. The choice is between a quiet exit with dignity or a public criminal investigation that will cost your father millions and utterly annihilate the Hale name." Tyler roared that he was the one betrayed, the victim of a ruthless coup. But for the first time in his life, his rage had no audience. Lydia Hale, who had followed him backstage, stood near the door, her composure utterly shattered. The sight of the debt summary, the sheer scale of his reckless failure, had finally broken her denial. She didn't rush to defend him. She simply stared at the debt, pale and defeated. I walked over to Lydia, my voice low enough only for her to hear, delivering the final, surgical cut. "I took nothing from your family, Lydia, except what the law and the truth allow. I kept my own earnings and received a protected asset that your husband knew was necessary. The rest, you can keep, to comfort your son as he learns to live within his means." I turned my back on them both, the moment of confrontation complete. Later that week, in Richard Hale's silent, towering office, we had our final conversation. He wasn't sentimental. He was strategic. "Your analysis of the asset consolidation was impeccable. Aubrey," he said, looking over my final report, "I want you to stay. I'm creating a new position, Senior Financial Oversight Consultant for Hale Holdings. You'll answer directly to the board, not to me or any other family member. You'll have a substantial salary, benefits, and independent decision-making authority. You will never again be financially dependent on any man, in this family or otherwise." It was the ultimate offer, a position of power, influence, and unassailable independence within the very empire that had tried to consume me. I accepted, but I set my own terms. "Mr. Hale, I will take the position, but my relationship with you and Hale Holdings is strictly professional. I do not require a surrogate family or any emotional obligation. I require a clean contractual working agreement that guarantees my autonomy." He smiled, a rare, genuine expression of respect. "Consider it done, Aubrey. That is exactly the kind of independence this company needs." The divorce was finalized 3 months later. It was clinical and quiet. Tyler, under immense pressure and facing jail time, signed the settlement. I retained the $2 million protective trust, a clear, documented settlement for the funds he had taken from our joint accounts, and most crucially, a legally irrefutable record that I was never the gold digger or the dependent wife. Tyler moved out of the luxurious townhome and into a small, supervised residence, left to face the consequences of his $4 million debt spiral. I left the Hale empire behind, though I kept the job. I used the money from the trust and my new income to purchase a modest, charming house in Willow Creek, a quiet suburb 20 miles from the flash of Harborview. There were no marble halls or imported chandeliers. Every tile, every coat of paint, was chosen and paid for by me. It was a home I had fully earned. One quiet afternoon, sitting on my small porch, I opened my personal finance app. The balance wasn't the breathtaking, dizzying number of the Hale universe, but it was enough. It was mine. I closed my eyes and whispered the final truth, the lesson earned through the crucible of fire. Being rich isn't about having someone else's name protecting your back. Being rich is knowing no one can cut off your life with a single click. I opened my private journal, my true space of reflection, and wrote a final, anonymous entry, a message to every woman caught in the shadow of her partner's wealth. If they ever cut you off from the money stream, remember this: the only thing that determines whether you are truly broke or not is your own ability to stand up. I closed the journal, placing it on the railing. I stood up, walked to the edge of the porch, and took a long, deep breath of the fresh, clean air. The story was over, and I had everything. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Let me know where in the world you're tuning in from, and share your thoughts in the comments below. If you love this story, please like this video, subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, and hit that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.